welcome to this Choral Studies video where we're going to be looking at the aims and some techniques and integration of what we're going to be doing this semester. So I'm basically going to introduce you to what our major aims are for this semester. And here they are. I want you to keep these in mind because as we work through the semester, you'll see how each of the things that we're going to learn is going to feed into the next part of what we're doing. The first thing is to develop skills for research. You might want to ask, why do we need to research when we are trying to learn how to be conductors? Okay, that's going to become clearer for you just now. Then, the second aim is to use the research to prepare for analyzing choral music. You've already done some analyzing, but I see that that needs a lot of work. So, how do we use the research that we do to prepare for analyzing choral music? Then, once we've learned a bit about analyzing choral music, how do we develop realistic goals for a choral rehearsal? Remember, when we're analyzing music in a choral situation, when we're going to do, when we're analyzing in order to prepare for a rehearsal, it's got to have an aim. Why are we developing analytical techniques if they are not for creating a good choral rehearsal? So part of our aim is to develop realistic goals for a choral rehearsal. And then our next aim is to translate the goals that we create into a rehearsal plan, right? And then the last one is integrating research, analysis, goals, and rehearsal plans to actually inform the way that we conduct a piece of music. So everything that we do in this semester is working towards developing skills so that it will lead to a good end product. First by doing research, then by analyzing, then by creating goals, and then by translating those goals into a good rehearsal technique, and then by putting all of those things together so that we can become good conductors for a concert. Okay? All of these things work together so that we can create good concerts. So those are our aims for the semester. Always keep these in mind because at times during the semester you may feel, why am I doing so much reading? Why am I doing so much preparation for a rehearsal? Some people think that most of the work needs to go into the concert, but in fact, for good choral conductors, we need to put most of the work into preparing for the rehearsals and into rehearsing. If we have good choral rehearsals, we'll have a good concert. And if we've prepared well for the rehearsal, we'll have a good rehearsal. They all have a knock-on effect. So, the most difficult part of this semester for you is going to be the academic reading that you're doing. Okay? I know that most of you really struggle with this. So I want to go through this slowly to create a plan for you to do your academic reading so that it's not scary for you. I know that academic reading is quite difficult and it becomes scary for those of us who are not used to it. But you will get used to it, and I want to give you a plan for tackling this so that you become better and better at it. So the first thing is, be very clear about the goals for your research. The only reason that you're going to be doing academic reading is to research, to look for something new. But what are you looking for? If you don't know what you're looking for, then the academic reading is nonsense, really. You may as well not do it. For all of you who are doing choral studies, whether it be choral studies 1, 2, or 3, you are going to be writing about a composer, all right? And you're going to be writing about the biography of a composer. That means their life story, okay? The biography of the composer. You're going to be looking for their compositional characteristics. That means, what do they do when they compose? What kind of things do they look out for? What kind of rhythms do they use? What kind of melodies do they use? Do they like particular types of harmony? Are they influenced by other composers? Are they influenced by their culture? Are they influenced by another culture? Those are the kind of things that are compositional characteristics. What makes up that composer's unique style? What makes it unique? Okay, those are compositional characteristics. And then you're also going to analyze one of that composer's compositions. So those are the things that you are looking for when you are doing your research. Those are your goals. So when you are reading something, first, before you start reading, go and see what it is that you're doing the reading for. And in all cases, for all of you, I've given you a research project, and they're all looking at the biography of the composer, the compositional characteristics, and analyzing one work. So when you're reading, you're going to look for those things. Look for things like, where was the composer born? What did he do during his life? What made him a composer, or her, for example? What made them composers? Why did they choose to do choral music? Who influenced their lives? Then, for compositional characteristics, we're looking at things like when a person writes a piece of music, what things are they listening to? Other pieces of music? Are they listening to another composer's piece of music? Do they like particular types of cultural rhythmic patterns? Do they like particular types of scales? All of those things. That's what you're looking for, all right? Now, once you are clear about what you are looking for in the reading, then you start reading, okay? And this is now the difficult part. Because in these readings, you will find words that you've never seen in your life before. Now, I want to just reassure you that even somebody like me who's been doing academic reading for many, many years, for well over 20 years now, I still come across words that I don't know. Okay? So even for me, and I have a PhD, I still encounter words that I don't know. So I have to go and look them up to see what they mean. For you, as a beginning academic, as a young academic, you will come across lots of words that you don't understand, and that's fine. The important thing is that you have your cell phone with you. All of you have one of these now, probably a smartphone. If you have a smartphone, go and look up that word. You write the word and then meaning next to it into Google, and it will give you the meaning. And in fact, there's always a little thing that you can click on, a little speaker sign that will even tell you how to pronounce the word. Okay? So go onto Google and look up the words that you don't know. Very, very important, because that will help you to understand what you are reading. The other thing is to make notes while you are reading. And I discovered this a bit late in my academic career, but I found that it's been very helpful. Have a little notebook next to you where you make notes about what you're reading. Things that are interesting for you, or things that are important. So let's say you found some information about the composer's life, write it down. I found this about the composer. He was born in blah, 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 and he was born on this date. Write it down. Okay? Or you can use a highlighter or a pencil in your reading. But as long as it's your own book, or you've made a photocopy of it, never highlight or make markings in a book that is not yours. All right. The other important thing with academic reading is this is not reading for pleasure. This is reading for meaning. Those are very important distinctions. When you are doing academic reading, it's going to take a long time. So just set yourself time aside for doing academic reading. You're going to have to read slowly and carefully because you want to make sure that you understand everything about what the person is writing. Okay? So for the kind of readings that I've given and assigned for you for this semester, for each article, you need at least 4 hours. I'm not joking when I say to you, you need at least 4 hours, probably a little bit more than that, to understand what you are reading. If you don't spend that kind of time with the reading, I can assure you, you will not understand what is going on in those articles. The English is quite complex, so you need to be able to look up the words. You need to put those words together to see if you understand. And if you don't understand it, you need to be coming back to me to say, I've read this, I still don't make sense of this particular sentence, so I'm not quite sure what's going on. Then I will help you. But if you haven't done that background checking and trying to read, trying to understand, I can never help you. Okay? The important thing is that you try and you give it your best shot when you're doing this academic reading because it's difficult. Now, the other thing is you will say to me, why do I have to do something difficult? Well, it's only by doing difficult things that we are stretching ourselves. I'm stretching you now because I want to see you grow into better conductors. And you'll see how all of this academic reading, before you do the preparing for your conducting, is actually going to make you into a superb conductor. Okay? But before you can see that for yourself, you actually have to do these things first. Just trust me on this, that the better you can do your academic reading, the better conductor you are going to be. Okay? I've done it and I can prove it to you through that. So look at me and trust me that it does help, because then it'll be worth doing it. So let's look at some of the reading that you might encounter and how you might deal with it as you're working through it. Here is an extract from an article that the third years are going to look at about the composer Vivaldi. Okay, and look at the title, it looks bizarre. Tenors and basses at the Venetian Ospedali. Okay, that's got nothing, you might say to me, that's got nothing to do with Vivaldi. Okay, well, actually, it's got quite a lot to do with Vivaldi, because Vivaldi worked in Venice at an ospedali. Okay, he actually worked at one of these places. Now, look at what I've underlined there, or what I've highlighted. You'll see it says, the little bit that I've done there, that the pieces that Vivaldi wrote were written for the Ospedale della Pietà, one of the 4 Venetian Ospedali Grandi. So the Gloria, Vivaldi's Gloria, was written for one of these ospedali. So we know that it was for this particular places. These institutions all had well-drilled choirs and orchestras recruited exclusively from their female residents. They only had females. Now, anybody who has sung Vivaldi's Gloria knows that there's part for soprano, alto, tenor, and bass. So what did they do for tenors and basses? There were no tenors and basses. What do you do? Well, females can sing tenor, but they certainly can't sing bass. So what did they do? Well, this article has a look at what may have happened in those particular circumstances. Okay? And why is that of interest? Because if you decide to perform this piece, maybe for Women's Day in a particular year, you want to do the Vivaldi Gloria with women only, because it was written only for women. Okay? Here's the interesting thing. So many of us think that music from the Baroque period was written by men for particular male performers. But that's not true. Here is an example of a piece of music that was written exclusively for performance by women. So let's say you organize a concert for Women's Day next year, and you want it to be performed only by women. You need to know what to do with the bass parts. So that's what this article is for, okay? So when you are reading, those are the kind of things you're looking for. Do you see? I've underlined them in the text, and then I'll put in my notebook. We know that Vivaldi worked at one of the Ospedali Grandi in Venice. So he was definitely there. We also know that he wrote the Gloria for one of those Ospedali Grandi. So it was only for female performers. There, I've made the note, only for female singers. Then we need to ask the question, was the Gloria only for females? And how would that affect the way that we perform it? Now, if you then said to Google, for example, Vivaldi's Gloria, women only, you will find recordings of the Gloria performed only by women. Then you'll suddenly see, hey, this is a new way of me to prepare for this piece. Do you see how important this is for you when you're doing your reading? Okay, so that's one of the ways that you can approach your reading. Let's have a look at another article. This article is about the composer that the second years are going to be dealing with. He's a Sotho composer, Mo Hapeloa's music. Okay, now in this particular article, and you're not going to have to read the whole article, you'll be very grateful about this because it's 50 pages long. I'm only going to give you 20 pages of this particular article. You'll see that I've underlined here one of the headings. It says composition, publication, and dissemination of his music. Now, if you look at the little indented paragraph, you'll see it says, this book that we are introducing to preachers, teachers, and Basotho in general from Lesotho and South Africa is the first of its kind. There are many songs here composed by Mosotho, a child of Lesotho, the one whose name appears above. We've been hearing some of these songs for quite a while, some in schools, both outside and inside, in praise of fine song. Today, we have all these songs together in one book. Here we have a little bit of a history about this particular composer and why he is so important. He's very important in South Africa because he's one of the first Basotho to set music down in notation so that it can be passed from one generation to the next. Okay, let's have a look at the next slide. So that's one of the things that you're looking for. How did this all happen and how does it work? Here is another interesting thing from the same article. See, I've underlined here. How were these songs composed and what did the publisher mean by we've been hearing some of these songs for quite a while? Again, look at the indented part. It says, at the beginning, he wrote a few lines. He would then test this with 2 to 3 people to hear how it sounded. He would continue with the short song, changing it here and there. He would try it again and then make changes. He would continue doing this until he had a complete song. This gives us the way that he writes his music. So when we're writing our notes, we can say composing was a process for this composer. He wrote his ideas down, then he tested them out on some people, he revised the idea, and he kept doing this until he had a complete song. Now that gives you an idea of how he put together his songs. Is that the way that all composers work? You'll have to ask yourself that question, okay? Not all composers work like that, but this is a very uniquely African way of writing songs by testing small ideas, then putting them again into a new composition, testing them out in the community, okay? Because community is very important in the African context. So composers also use community in the way that they compose their music. So those kind of things are what we're looking for when we are writing notes and when we are reading. That gives you just an idea of how to set these things out. Now, how do you bring all of these ideas together? When you've finished reading all of the articles that I've assigned, you're going to need to look at your notes and those things that you've read to try and bring them all together into a cohesive whole when you start writing an essay for me or a reflection piece. So examine all of your notes about the readings that you've done. Go and look at your notes. What did you write in them? Okay, and you'll find all sorts of things that you've written there. Some of the things you won't need to put into your essay, but quite a lot of it will. Okay, you're going to try and bring all the parts about particular topics together. So everything about the composer's biography, for example. When was he born? Where did he work? What influenced him in his music? When did these things happen? Bring all of those things together. Then look for all of the things about the composer's style. How did he use rhythm? How did he use melody? How did he use harmony? How was his composing style influenced by other people? Bring all of those things together. Then you'll see that it'll be easier to start writing about the composer's life all in one go and writing about the composer's style in one go. The other thing that you can do when you are reading these articles is to see how other people write about a composer's composition. How do they analyze it? What do they look for? What do they find interesting? And how can you apply this to pieces by the same composer when you analyze them? Okay, so there are many things that you are looking for when you are reading. If you have these things ready in your mind to look for, the process of reading is going to be much easier for you and much more fulfilling too, because you know that you're looking for particular things in the way that you're reading. Now, I want to give you some tips about analyzing music because I see that many of you are really struggling with this. By the time that you have read all of the articles about the composer and the music that is set for you, you will know something about the style of their composition, the way that they compose. And this will help you to make decisions about the piece that you are going to teach your own choir for this course. So, for example, are there characteristic rhythmic patterns that the composer uses? Does a composer use the same type of rhythms often in the different types of music that he writes? Are there particular melodic motives that a composer likes to use? Quite often composers really like a particular set of notes and they keep using that over and over again in the music that they write. Does a composer set texts in a particular way? Do they like particular texts? Okay. Do South African composers like to set music in the vernacular, for example? Which vernacular do they like to use? How do they use the vernacular in particular ways? And then, does the composer have particular expectations of particular voices? Some composers, for example, write very difficult parts for sopranos. They often write them very, very high, mainly because they're men and they don't know that sopranos struggle to be up in their tessitura all the time. Okay, so do particular composers have expectations of the voices that you need to be aware of and to be able to teach well when you are teaching the music? All of these things you will be much more familiar with by the time you've done all of the reading that I've set. So let's look at a real life example now. This is not a piece that you are going to be analyzing for your courses, but it's one that you'll be familiar with. I've chosen Giakolwa by the Zulu composer Qinisile Sabisi, who wrote this piece called the Zulu Mass several years ago. I think it's Qinisile Sabisi. And I want to show you this because I think many of you have sung this piece or are familiar with it. So you'll know that the piece starts, Giakolwa, Giakolwa. Okay, and that starts in the alto voice. That little melody has a very distinctive rhythm. Ba, 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 da, dee, da, dee, da. Now, if we look at this piece over from the beginning to the end, we'll see that that particular rhythm and actually that melodic line comes many, many times. I'll just show you 3 times where that comes. So here it comes in bar 40, for example. Giakolwa, Giakolwa. Usually it comes with the same words, by the way. I believe, I believe. It comes again much later in the piece. There's another example of it. Okay, so every time this particular rhythm and melody come, you can say to yourself, maybe this has structural significance. Maybe it's telling us something about how the music is structured. Okay, so what I would do is I would write an A above the first time that it comes, and every time that it reoccurs, it comes again, put that A again. Then you'll start to see where the patterns are in the music. So all of these examples that I've shown you now, and there are more in the piece, write an A next to them so that you know, we're coming back to this Giakolwa motive. Maybe you can call it the Giakolwa motive, okay? Then you'll see, is it in the same key every time? Is the melody always in the soprano part, or is it in one of the other parts? Is the rhythm always exactly the same, or is it slightly different? And what happens after that? Okay, so when you have an A section, is it always followed by a B section, or does C come after that, or D? Okay, so that will give you an idea of how the piece is structured. Then, here is an example from that same piece. If you look at all of the voice parts now, you'll see that the soprano is doing something, then the alto voice is doing something different, the tenor voice is doing something different, and the bass voice is doing something different. This is called polyphony, okay, or counterpoint. When you see a section like this, you know immediately that this is going to take longer to rehearse. Let me contrast it with something that we've seen just before. Have a look at this. Giakolwa, Giakolwa. Do you see that all of the voices are singing the exact same rhythm? So you can teach that very easily. You teach the rhythm, da-da-dee, da-dee, da-dee, da. The sopranos, the altos, the tenors, and the basses, they all have the same rhythm. So it's easy. You've already got the rhythm out of the way. Then the only other thing you need to teach them is their individual lines of music, okay? But when you have a section like this, where all of the voice parts are doing unique things at the same time, these sections require a lot more time to rehearse because you have to get everything to line up carefully. Everybody needs to know exactly when they're coming in and what they're doing. Okay? So when you analyze a piece of music, you're looking for sections that are homophonic. That means where everybody's doing exactly the same thing at the exact same time rhythmically. Or polyphonic. They're doing different things at the same time. When the music is polyphonic, know that it's going to take much longer to learn these sections because everybody has to be individually taught, or each vocal part has to be individually taught. So here's an example of homophony. That means where all of the vocal parts are singing the same rhythm all the way through. Do you see? Each part is even saying the same words at the same time. So that will take much shorter to learn than the section that we've just seen, which is polyphonic. So when you're analyzing a piece, divide it into two sections. Are we looking for polyphonic, where things are different, where all the voices are singing different things, and when they are singing homophony, when they're singing the same rhythms at the same time? You'll know then that the polyphonic sections you're going to have to spend more time on in the rehearsal, and the homophonic sections you're not going to need so much time, okay? Usually the polyphonic sections too are an actually distinct part of the structure, so give them a letter as well, B or C or D or whatever, to show us that this is very different to what has come before or after. Then, I've chosen this section because it says solo. Do you see that each voice part is a solo there? When you have solo sections, you know immediately that you don't need to rehearse this in your main rehearsal. Have your solo rehearsals outside the main rehearsal, okay? So you're not going to include this in your main rehearsal. You make a note of that in your rehearsal notes. I'm going to meet with the soloists individually, and I'm going to teach them their parts. You don't need to waste time with the whole choir being there teaching the solo parts, okay? So this is a section that you are not going to work on in the choral rehearsal. So whenever you see solo, make a note to yourself, I'm going to do this outside of the rehearsal. Here is another example of a solo. The whole middle section of the Gia Kolwa piece is a bass solo, so that you can teach to the bass on your own. He doesn't need to be there in the rehearsal when you are learning just the choral parts with the rest of the choir. Another important thing to ask yourself when you've got solo parts in a song is, how am I going to choose the soloist? That needs to be foremost in your mind when you're doing analysis. When you look at the vocal part for the bass part, for example, which bass in your choir has the voice that would best suit this particular solo? Okay, so this solo has some rather low notes for a bass. You need a bass voice that can handle lower notes. Okay, that's very important as a consideration. Then, here is another important thing. You'll see the words wavuka, wavuka. Okay, this is the part of the text which is talking about Jesus rising from the dead. He rose, he rose. Okay, now have a look at the melody here. It starts on an F in the soprano and goes up. Ba, ba. Also in the alto, in the tenor, and the bass. Da, dee. The music goes up and the words are talking about resurrection. This is called something which is text painting. It means that the composer is using the music to bring out the meaning of the words. The words are about resurrection, about rising up. So the music is also about rising. Ba, ba. Okay? When you get this kind of thing in music, it's very important because it's telling us that the composer is trying to heighten the meaning of the words by doing the same thing in the music, by making the music rise or whatever it may be. Okay? When you see something like this, make a note of it so that you can tell your choir, look, the composer is trying to give added meaning here, so that when they sing this section, they are well aware of what the meaning of the words is and that the meaning is brought out in the way that they sing it. Okay? These things are very important to look for. They're called text painting. There are other examples of this. For example, if the text talks about going down some steps and the music goes la, 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 it's also going down by step, okay? There are many other examples of this, but this is just one of them. So we're looking for all sorts of things when we're analyzing music. We're not only looking for the key of the piece. Many of you tell me what the key is. I can see the key of the piece. That's fine. It's easy for me to see that. You don't need to tell me so much about the key of the piece. What I'm looking for is what makes this piece unique and how am I going to make these unique things teachable? What am I going to do when I look at this piece and I see, oh, this section is polyphonic. How am I going to teach the polyphonic section? Okay? How long will it take me to do this? Sometimes polyphonic music takes very long to learn because we're using a layered technique of teaching. First, let's say, for example, we have to teach the basses their part. Once we've taught the basses their part, we can add the tenors above that. Once the tenors and the basses together are working well, then we add the altos, so they're layers coming up and above. But that takes a long time. Whereas when all of the music is happening in a homophonic texture, we can teach almost immediately everybody straight away because the harmony is moving together. Okay, so these are the kind of things we're thinking about when we're looking at music. Which sections are going to take the longest to learn? Which are going to be quick to learn? How am I going to teach the rhythms of a particular section? Am I going to spend a long time on learning notes or on getting the rhythms right? Am I going to get the singers to sing without the words when they're learning the notes? Or am I going to put in the words straight away? Am I going to use tonic sulfur syllables to teach them? Okay, all of these kind of questions need to be dealt with in your analysis. But you also need to demonstrate to me that you know how the piece of music works. How has it been put together? How does it follow the text? How does the composer make the text come alive in the way that they write the music? These are the kind of things that I'm looking for when you analyze a piece of music for choral studies, because all of these things come together in the way that you're going to conduct, in the way that you're going to teach, and the way that you are going to perform the music eventually. And that's where I end this teaching.